Experience. I'm your host, Jason Cavness. The Jason Cavness Experience is brought to you by Cavness HR. At Cavness HR, we deliver HR to companies with 49 or fewer people with our HR platform and providing you with a dedicated HR business partner. Our guest today is Kerry Steuart. Kerry, are you ready to be great today?
Yes.
Kerry is a Gulf War veteran who spent 8 years in the Air Force. He has a Bachelor of Science in Business Management, is a 500-hour registered yoga teacher with Yoga Alliance, and has been retired since 2014. Suffering from chronic pain and PTSD since the military days, Kerry understands firsthand the numerous benefits of yoga and meditation for pain reduction and mental clarity. Kerry, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Kerry, I'm gonna go way back in the day on your LinkedIn profile. You were actually a manager at a CC's Pizza.
Yes, sir.
That had to be an experience. I can't ever imagine like back in then, like pizza, all you can eat 99-cent buffet. People bring the whole families in. Like it was just. I remember like CC Pizza just being madness. So can you tell me about that experience, son?
Yeah, we would feed about 2,000 people a week, and yeah, it was insane because when I first started, it was $2.99 buffet, and I actually started that journey in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, and so you would have all the people that would come in and the families and just all walks of life. Especially in a tourist place like that, you'd have the girls coming in their bikinis, and we'd ask them if they could put on some shirts or shorts or things like that. They just got off the beach and they're ready to come in and just eat pizza and things like that. And we'd have lines out the door, and so we'd have to send somebody cut up pizza smaller or garlic bread, and hey, go feed this line, make them a little bit happy until they could come in and get a seat. So it was I would say transitioning from a manager into an owner or franchisee was one of the biggest learning experiences that I've ever had in my life.
Yeah, I think there's nothing worse than a customer CC Pizza goes up to get some pizza. There's nothing there.
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. And sometimes, Kansas City, that would happen. We would have like big groups of band or church groups or something, just pull in the parking lot, not call us, not warn us. And you have 100 people walking in, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's going to be about 15, 20 minutes before we catch up, guys. So
you had to run the whole, like electricity, like everything was on you, right?
Yeah. Franchisee, you definitely are responsible for the lease. You're responsible for, A to Z within that restaurant. So, when labor prices go up or minimum wage goes up, you've got to go through and calculate what is it I can, raise my prices because I still got to pay these employees, and how many customers am I going to lose over this? And I would say on average, when you increase minimum wage, it's about a 20% when you increase your prices of the people you're going to lose. You'll lose about 20% of your customers when you increase your price overall. So
I mean, like all the minimum wage stuff going down to $15 an hour, what the case would be, like whether they deserve that or not, that's a different conversation. But
right.
Still, like you have to pass the cost on, right? And what's that cutoff point? Because saying, well, I'll pay like $3.50 for a hamburger, fries, or whatever, but I'm not paying $5, right? Everyone has a cutoff point based on economics, and I don't think a lot of people realize that.
No, and the taxes that go into that, and the insurance and unemployment insurance, and all those other, and you have so many fixed costs. So when I ran the restaurant, my gas bill was over $800 a month, and plus all the other fixed costs. So your rent costs are fixed, your gas cost is pretty much the same, electric cost, all those fixed costs that you have. So, none of that is going to go down every year. Everything always increases more and more. So
I'm guessing you can't say, hey customers, I'm gonna turn off half the lights, like save them on my light bill, right? That probably won't go too well.
Right. So in the afternoon, we would go down to, instead of having 3 ovens, we'd go down to 1 oven to help save a little bit on the gas. But, it's just, there's so many costs that people don't even understand that are associated with a business. Like when there's a food shortage, so like tomatoes or cucumbers or lettuce or whatever it may be, there's a shortage of that, then we're struggling, or sometimes we have to pay more for just, our produce and things like that. So our fuel prices, when fuel prices go up, everything in the restaurant has to be delivered, and, all of our costs go up.
I mean, I've been guilty of this before, like going, like we'll say, like Kentucky Fried Chicken to the drive-through. Yeah. They're like, we're out of chicken today. Like, not, of course, I think like, how's that possible? like, but you don't understand, like you said, all the stuff going on, the fruits, everything, like how you got a chicken. It's literally in your name of your business, right? But like it's different times now, right? It's crazy.
It is.
So was that your first time being like an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it was. I would say, a mixed bag. I learned so many things about labor, so much about people, so much about running a business. Each and every day is a new experience. And what people don't realize is, I would say, every week something major happens in a CC's Pizza. Either your deep freeze will go out, or something with the water, or one day I had a toilet break, like the whole toilet, or we had a kind of an L-shaped restaurant in the back, and this family got up to eat, and they're like, "You need to go check in the back, you got a water leak." I'm like, "What?" And I walk around there, and it was like a 6-top table. And I look up, and the HVAC had fall through the ceiling, and the vent was like on the table. And so one of the air conditioners, I think I had 6 of them or something, that water got condensed in there, pressured up, and then it backfilled into the vents and filled up, and then it just collapsed. So it was just things like that every single week. I wish I would have kept a diary and a log of everything that happened, because the craziest things you never even thought would imagine happen in a restaurant. And you have a whole list of people on call, that A, B, and C, because you just never know who you're going to need at any time.
So when you left, how did it work? Like, did you sell your stake to someone else, or CC took the franchise back, or they went out of business? What happened with that?
So that is one crazy, bizarre story, and we can dive into a little bit of that. So I was a general manager, and then the VA said, "Hey, we'll pay for your book, school, and tuition if you want to go to school." And at the same time, my grandmother had died in Oklahoma, and I went back, and I was in Kansas City, and before that I was in Florida, and I saw the cost of living in Oklahoma. And my wife and I had some really in-depth conversations, and we said, "You know what, we can go to Oklahoma, we can sell this old house that was built in the 60s in Kansas City and buy a brand new house for the same price in Oklahoma." So we loaded up, relocated down there. I was 3 years into school. I had 1 semester left, and I said, "I got to finish this semester," because both my mom and dad did the same thing. They had 1 semester left of college and never finished. And they always said that was one of their biggest regrets ever. But my buddy that owned the CC's said, "I want out of the store completely. I want to go back to my ranch in Texas. You can just have the store. I'm not going to charge you anything for it. We're great friends. I know you'll take care of it. There's still a lease on this property." So immediately I came in, I took over. I said, "Hey, in about 6 months, 12 months at the most, I'll be back in school." And I get into the store, and then CC's is like, "Well, you've been out for more than 18 months, so you need a business partner." So they gave me a business partner, this guy named Hal, and he was doing really well as the books go. And so me and him became a partnership, but he goes, "I really just want to be a silent partner. I don't want to really, everything you're doing, you've done very well, very successful. You can buy me out in like a year." And so I'm like, "All right." So I get the store up and running, get things going. And then he changes his contract, because the contract we had was just verbal. It wasn't actually ever a written agreement. And then he goes in and behind my back somehow changes the agreement with CC. So your operating agreement and your franchise agreement are supposed to be the same. Well, the franchise agreement with CC's, he changed it to where he was like 85% owner and I was 15% owner. And so, there's some discussions and some arguments and some things that are occurring. Meanwhile, this guy was just doing a lot of things that were crooked, and he was being deceitful on a lot of things. And so what really drew it for me is that there was a shooting out in the parking lot. 2 of the rival high schools right there had a shooting. There's an IHOP and a 54th Street Bar and Grill. And I have family members coming to pick up their kids, and bullets are going over their heads and their cars, and there's bullet holes all in the awning. And I just said, and I lost all that staff. All the staff that went through that gunfight that night basically did not want to come back into that environment. And I don't blame them. I mean, who would, right? And especially kids, And so from that point on, I told him, I said, "I need out of this restaurant. I want to get out. I want to move on. I can't do this anymore. This hasn't been a good business relationship with us. It's impossible for me now to want to buy you out." And so I said, hey, I'm turning in my resignation. I'll give you 30 days to find somebody. And he's like, oh, can you give me more time? Give me more time. And I was busy, but I was still making income. So I said, I'm fine. So finally I said, hey, December 31st, I'm gone. I'm locking the doors to this place and I'm out of here. And he said, okay, fine. And so, just like everything else with him, I could never get him to sign on the dotted line or go through an agreement. And I went to go work for a utility company. Ironically, I was doing IT, and they pull us into a conference room a week later and said, you can't leave this room. You have to turn off your cell phone, no communication. The owner of the company comes in. It was a privately owned. He said, hey, I'm selling the company. We're announcing it in 30 minutes. You guys have to stay here until the announcement. I'm like, man, I haven't got a paycheck yet. The place I'm working for is closing down. And then after that, I went to go work for the IRS. Well, then he filed a lawsuit against me, and then he hadn't paid taxes. He didn't pay any of the taxes. We were using the same accountant. The accountant had access to everything. And so since he didn't transfer anything in my name, I was still liable for it. And actually there was warrants out for my arrest because he had done things illegal in the store and never transferred my name over. So it's a very long, crazy story, but
Yeah, that's a very bad experience you had.
It was. And so we had to end up paying $75,000 in back taxes for a certain time period. I mean, I even went to the IRS. I gave them my resumes. They have all my tax forms, but we had to sit down with like a kind of a counselor lady. And I just said, this is horrible, and she goes, yeah, this is very unfortunate. You have to go through this, but this is the law. But what's an even twist to this story is that he befriended like a 16-year-old girl that was a register girl at one of his stores, moved him in, and they were doing all kinds of crazy things. And she ended up murdering him.
Wow. That's definitely a twist on the story.
Yeah. And I mean, we had to file bankruptcy personally twice. And it was a benefit, I would say, in the long run, because we had to pay cash for our kids' school, cash for cars, cash for our houses, so we walked away with that with no debt. But it was, we had to file twice because every time we get close to not having bankruptcy, he would come out with another personal lawsuit, put liens on our properties, all kinds of stuff. So I learned a lot that probably a lot of people never get to experience or learn through a business interaction. So, I encourage people that if you're going to go in business with somebody, probably don't do it.
Yeah, you definitely. Everyone always talks about all the great stuff about business, like being a millionaire in 6 weeks, all the case may be, living your life. You've definitely seen the darker side, so to speak.
Yeah, I would say that most people don't own the business owns them, and it's unfortunate that they're tied up so much mentally, physically, and spiritually, and engulfed into that business that a lot of times their relationships begin to struggle. And I could say that there was times during that my relationships, with my kids, my wife, my friends definitely struggled because I devoted so much time, energy, and effort into making a successful business. And it was, I mean, we were number one in sales for Coke. We won this Coke, promotion. Our sales increased over 20% every year. So it was just, it was one of those things you have to take accountability from day one, whatever it is in your relationships, personally and professionally, wherever you're at in your life, but you have to take accountability and say, what is it I can do to, make this business as best as possible? And you can't play the role of a victim. I can't say that the people before, this is the situation that I'm in now. No, today is the day that you start, and I took that belief every single day, and every single day I did, what I call guerrilla marketing, and went out into the community and marketed that business. And I know that's one reason why it was so successful.
So besides not taking on this new partner, any other lessons or advice you can pass on?
I mean, for me, one thing that I did was I give evaluations, or feedback to my employees annually. But what I did was I would pick one person out of each position. So like a bus disher, or maybe the prepper, my register person, or the cook, or whoever it is. And I would have them say, hey, here's the thing, is a week from today, you're going to give me an evaluation. I want you to sit down with me and give me the feedback. And this isn't going to affect your job. This isn't going to affect anything like that. But I just need to know where I'm going to grow and flourish. And I think that goes back to like emotional intelligence, but also humility, that no matter what position that you're in, that you're willing to take feedback and understand who you are and their perception of you. Because so many times in our life, our ego gets in the way, and we feel like we're entitled or we're better. And we don't value other people's, perception of us. And it's very important that the person washing the dishes or prepping the food or serving the food or whatever it is knows, I understand their perception of me and what guests see, because people are going to talk. And so I think that's what's one of the things that I learned the most was just being humble,
I think one thing too, like, that person washes the dishes, like a lot of people look down on them, just the low minimum wage worker, but you don't know what his dreams are. Like they might be doing that to pay themselves through college, or you never know what the case may be, right? You never know what other people's stories are.
Yeah, I had a cook that was from Mexico. She saved up all her money and moved back to oh my gosh, it's one of the places in the coast where everybody does. I have brain fog half the time, but it's one of those beautiful places that people go to resort in. And she opened up a pizza restaurant. She took the menus, the recipes, she took everything, and she saved her money for all those years that she worked there. And that's it, man. I mean, who would never thought making $8 an hour at a pizza restaurant in Grandview, Missouri, could get you an amazing restaurant in Mexico and a tourist place, So you're right.
So this kind of reminds me of a post I did a couple of days on LinkedIn. I did a question on LinkedIn. I said, like, why is it so many people think they're special or talented, but they're really not, actually nowhere close to being that, but they think they are and they act like it. And so many people actually talented and special, they think they're average. Like, just seems like a disconnect, right? Like, why is that?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, well, I go back to saying that your gifts and talents are unique, and you don't have to have a conventional life to be happy. So she probably took a lot of notes every day and went home and understood about what it was to run a business. But I think a lot of times we're in a very unique society where people don't want to give true feedback, right? And failure is feedback. When you fall, you're going to learn, right? And I think a lot of times people don't want to think that providing optimistic or realistic feedback is positive when it really is. These are the areas in our life that I need to improve in and you need to improve in. I think that's one reason why I don't have a lot of friends, and the friends that I've had probably for years is because my wife says that I hold people to a certain standard, a certain caliber. And what that's allowed me to do is have healthy boundaries, but also not to have a lot of drama in my life, a lot of chaos, because I don't want those people in my life. It's not healthy for me,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big believer higher standards is actually a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So next, talk about your volunteer experience at, I believe, the World War I Museum in Kansas City.
And the art museum. So I had to backstep that just a little bit, but I was doing cybersecurity for the USDA, and I was coming home and I'd get on the couch. We had a 2-story house, and I couldn't get off the couch. I mean, for me to go outside, I had to pee out the back door and stuff. And the weekends, like if my wife wanted me to go to Target or go shopping, so many times I would just collapse or sit down on the aisle, and I'm just like, I can't walk, I can't move. Like I was in a lot of pain mentally, physically, and spiritually, and I didn't understand what was going on. And my wife said, this isn't what I signed up for, which I thought it meant she wanted a divorce. But really what she was saying is like, you need to focus on your health and well-being. You need to retire. You need to just, you're spending too much time, energy, and effort for that career, that job. And there's nothing left for me. There's nothing left for the family. And we only have one life to live. So I retired and focused on my health. And so the first thing I did was I went out to New Jersey for Gulf War testing. And they spent a week out there. And it was kind of depressing in a sense, because I think at that point I was maybe 15 or 20% disabled. I was medically discharged, but they said that, there's 300,000 or 330, something like that, thousand people with the same kind of conditions I had. And their belief system was it's from immunizations and exposure to the Gulf War. And so I decided to retire. And when I did, I said, I need to connect with the community at some point in some level. So I really love the military, the structure. I love the service. I love how people are willing to truly give their life to make our lives better. and I love the arts and entertainment. So I volunteered for two places once a week at the War Memorial and the Nelson Art Museum. So I could kind of satisfy both of those desires, and those ability to connect. So the World War Museum in Kansas City, if you guys ever go to Kansas City, I highly, highly recommend it. It's an amazing, amazing experience. The people there are highly trained and they care. They care about the community. Most of the volunteers are military, ex-military.
And how long are you still volunteering those two places?
No, I'm not there anymore. I've been in Colorado for 3 years,
Okay.
and then I quit volunteering. So it's probably been about 3.5, 4 years I haven't volunteered at those places.
And then you also spent some time as a freelance photographer, right? Doing that as a
Yeah.
business.
Yeah, I did. And that was, that was a form for me to give back. I got a lot of negative feedback from a lot of people, because once again, it was an opportunity for me to connect. And I know in Kansas City, in higher populated areas, there's a lot of people that can't afford photography, right? So at first I started off just charging like $25 or $50 per hour. And all these photographers are so mad at me, so furious. And they're like, you're underbidding us, you're costing us business. And I said, okay.
That's called free market, right?
It is. So I changed my format. And what I decided to do was I didn't charge at all. I had suggested amounts that you contribute to a nonprofit on my behalf. So that I was like, hey, if you're upset that I'm charging, that's fine. Then I'm just not going to charge anything, because now I feel like I'm doing a service. I would charge for the photos. There was an online, format. So if you wanted to order photos online, I would still make money that way. But for me to actually go out and photograph and do the edits and everything, all that, I just asked that you made a contribution to your favorite nonprofit on my behalf. And it was a really, really great opportunity for me to kind of give back to the community, and others give back to the community, and expand. And I actually got a lot more business that way than I did when I was charging.
So what you doing, just headshots or like weddings, or what kind of photography were you doing?
Yeah, I did weddings. I did a lot of fitness models. There's a lot of fitness in Kansas City. So somehow I got into that realm, and the friends would refer the friends. So I did a lot of fitness models. I did a lot of weddings and a lot of seniors headshots, and a lot of businesses. So if it's a real estate office or something like that, I would go and do headshots for those organizations. And then what's that called? Like, when bars, like a Coyote Ugly, where they have a whole thing of bars or women in different outfits, I would do stuff like that for a lot of the bars as well.
And just all pretty much word of mouth? You had a marketing plan or something?
No, it started off word of mouth, and then I did a Groupon, and then I canceled the Groupon. But after you get into like one realm, when you do one or two people in the fitness industry, or you do one or two weddings, then and that's the thing, is I only scheduled one photo session a week. That was it, because I was still volunteering. I still had other things. I wasn't going to overextend. And so if, the time and everything schedule worked out with those people, then it worked out. If otherwise, it didn't. But I only did one session a week.
Yeah, I have someone here in the Seattle area. He's a photographer, and he started out doing wedding stuff. And he's trying to get out of weddings and do like different things. But every time the money calls him, right? Like the money calls him, right? Because he wants to do like more nature stuff, different those things, like other, but that wedding stuff keeps calling him back. Every time he says he's not gonna do it anymore, someone says, I'll give you this much money. And like,
yeah. Oh yeah. But for the money, you make a lot. And then if you can sell your photos as a package, then you're going to make even more. So it's definitely advantageous. But to me, it was just an opportunity to connect. And it was like a real true side hustle. I mean, the money that I made before I started asking for it, or even from photo sales, it paid for all my gear and all my equipment. Everything was paid for, so it's kind of like, I get a hobby, and then I have a little bit of extra money, and everything's going to be paid for this hobby as well. So, yeah.
So we're going to talk about yoga in a minute, but with you doing the volunteer at the two museums, the photography, yoga, do you still consider yourself like a creative?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think we're all creative. I think it's just finding the opportunity within us, those energy, or those juices, of however you want to say it, but we're all creative. All of us have unique gifts and talents. And I think sharing that with the community at some facet and some level is just such a wonderful experience.
When did it pop in your mind? When did the light bulb go off in your head? Like, like you're a creative. When did you realize that?
I don't know. I mean, I had a camera probably middle school, an old Canon AE1. I don't know if you're into photography at all, but I had an old film, and I remember taking photos with that thing, and then I would go develop it, and you get it back like a week later, and like 1 or 2 photos would come out good. So it was back in the old days. Like if you did a whole roll of film and 1 or 2 came out good, it was good. So I think it's kind of like, once again, it's the feedback, right? Like I would take photos of nature and people and just post them up, and people are like, wow, your photography just really inspires me. You have just such a unique eye and concept of, and so, it doesn't serve everybody, but I would get a lot of feedback. And so, well, I said, let me try this photography thing as a side hustle, let me see what that's like. And so that's kind of how all the things in my life and journey, I mean, I just really blessed. I did electronic warfare in the Air Force. And then when I got out and did cybersecurity, I was never formally trained in cybersecurity. I taught myself everything, I didn't go and finish up my degree until I was almost done with CC's. So a lot of it was real life experiences. I had the foundations for 3 years in there, but all those things that I went through in CC's, I didn't learn in college. I think college is very valuable. I will say that there's things that I learned in college that I utilize each and every day of my life. And a lot of times we don't realize that. But I would say a college education, if you can get it and afford it and pay for it, I don't think anybody should go in debt for college. But I think if you can get into that realm of little or no debt, it's going to be valuable tools and lessons and life experiences that you'll use each and every day.
I think a lot of people get wrong about college, and don't get me wrong, like it's overpriced. Like I think the stats show the price has increased by 1,000% since the 70s, but salaries only increased by 5%. So all that too. But I think people forget it's not the schooling; it's like the people you meet, the networking, right? So I remember hearing a story somewhere where this guy was talking about the story about his son in North Carolina. I think it was going to Duke, and the son said, "Hey, Dad, I'm not making it. I'm making D's and C's. I'm wasting your money. Let me go to another school." And he's talking about his roommate. His roommate is cussing, right? His roommate's doing this, doing that. He said, "Son, the reason I'm paying for you is so you can meet people like your roommate. So you're going to stay at Duke, right?"
Yeah.
I think people miss that a lot. The social aspect,
Yeah. The connection. And you think most of the time, it's a common bond. We have a common connection. There's something that brought us there together to this community to connect, and whatever you decide to do with it, from that point forward. A lot of people are just miserable, right? Or struggling. A lot of people that they see this as short term, but you're right. It truly is about connections and everything that we do. And that's part of the thing is, when I lead retreats and I talk to anybody that I feel is a little down or depressed or suicidal, I tell them, I said, you don't know your future connections. You don't know who you're going to meet tomorrow, next week, or next year that's going to really just make this huge impact, or you're going to make an impact in their life, so.
Yeah, connections are random. Like I remember I was eating a lunch at a restaurant here in the Pike Place Market, and I just talking to this lady and her son. Right, they came to visit Seattle. I think from somewhere. I think somewhere in Iowa, just come to make a random trip and just talk for like 30 minutes. Right, it was so pleasant and so invigorating. Right, you just never know.
Yeah. And so I think that, it's just opening ourselves up to those connections, opening ourselves up and not blocking. The problem is a lot of us live in fear, anxiety, doubt, guilt, and shame, and we're blocking. And the thing is, you can't numb or block certain emotions. If you're blocking any of those emotions, you're blocking the joy, the peace, the serenity, the love, the forgiveness. So, we can't selectively numb our any of those emotions. We're do it all. So
Kerry, you said everyone's a creative, but I'll say I'm probably less creative than most people, right? So what I try to do, I'm really intentional. I try to surround myself creative. Like when I hire for the company, I try to hire creators, right? Because I think creatives think differently. Can you talk about the advantage of how creatives to have a different mindset, how they approach things differently?
Yeah, I would say that it's a concept of thinking almost as beautiful and elegant, an array of different colors, insights, and emotions. Also kind of being more observant. And I would say for me, it's being in the moment. not really thinking about the past or the future. But as I look out my window right now and I see the blue skies and I see the evergreens and the pines and I see the snow and I see the rock formations, I can see all the different shadows and contrasts. And so it's just like when I look at you and I see the gray and the black and the different in the beard and how the hair, everything that I look at you, I kind of would describe it as, hey, how does this person look? How does that mic stand? How's the computer? Everything like that. So I think part of it is being very observant. I think a part of it is being in the moment. And I would think also is seeing the beauty, seeing the positive in life and not focusing on the negative. But how can I share this experience? If you think about photography as an example, all I'm doing is capturing that precise second, that moment in time. That's all I'm doing is capturing this moment. It used to be on film, but now it's through digital, right? And so how can you capture this precise moment? And how can you attach yourself to the thoughts, feelings, and emotions within this precise moment and being in this moment, not focusing on the past or not focusing on the future? And a lot of that goes into mindfulness, meditation, and yoga. So I think creatives also, I wouldn't say are the worst critics, but I would say that they also expect more out of themselves. They want to be able to express and share love, joy, peace, but they also want to share the pain, the guilt, and the shame. But it's just not always their primary focus. They want to say, how can I share some of the beautiful things in this life? How can I share some of the trauma and the tragic events as history goes on? Because I want people to understand what this moment was like. And so go ahead.
I think you like the example. So a couple of years ago, I helped set up a tech event, right? And nobody was helping out with the speakers, whatever. And my intern, Noah Thomas, shout out to Noah Thomas. He's a creator with a capital C. So the event had ended. It was like 6 of us in the elevator, right? Maybe actually 6 or 8 of us in the elevator, pre-COVID, of course. And he says, look up. Like, man, we're not looking. What are you talking about? He said, man, just look up. We looked up and it was like a mirror on the ceiling. He took a picture. It had to be the best picture we've ever seen, right? I mean, it caught us all in the mirrors, and none of us ever thought to look up and take a picture, right? Yeah. But he did. Like you said, seeing the created everything, and that picture, it went viral and everywhere, right? It was just amazing.
Yeah, I think it's a different perspective, and I'm not saying that other people's perspective is right or wrong. It's different. And a lot of times, if you can capture that, edit it, and enhance it, then you're to the point where, to me, this is beautiful. This is impactful. Like Dorothy Lane, some of the photos that she took during the Depression, are some of the most impactful photos because she toured around, during those times and during the Dust Bowl and captured those moments of those people that were really struggling and suffering. We've seen a lot of that through the Vietnam War and Korean War, people that captured those moments. And without the photography or without those people being there, you really get an unbiased, I would say, emotional attachment because you're looking at those people's eyes and you're feeling it, right? Unlike the media today that has to have a spin or a different agenda, to it, you're getting the raw, authentic, real person back in those days.
Hey, so how close are you to all the fires that just happened in Colorado? Are you close by that? That's kind of far away.
Yeah, I'm close. So we go for a hike south of here, and what was that? 2 weeks ago, we go on a sunset one every evening, and to the north, the whole sky was just covered with the clouds, and then to the west was a snowstorm that was coming in the day after, and it was so windy though that day. Like we've had, I think it was 108 was the wind when I went out that day. I mean, it was crazy, and so we went on our hike. It was around 50 miles an hour wind. I mean, it's just that's a challenge hiking just with that type of wind. And so I wish I could have captured that moment. I would have had I couldn't even done it with a drone, but it was just kind of magical seeing all the smoke, and it kind of almost looks like a cloud. And then you look over and then the storm is so low. We're at 7,000 feet right here. So when we go hiking, it's just a little bit higher, but the storm was like below the mountain peaks, just right above your head. And it was just this kind of array of, once again, emotions, because it's times like that, you'll realize you'll never probably experience that again in your life. You'll never see that off in the distance of the storm come in, and you're hoping that storm is going to help dissipate, the fires, which it did. It had a big impact on it.
Yeah. So luckily it wasn't a snowstorm first in the fire, right? Luckily
Yeah.
the snow came after the fire and helped out a little bit.
Yeah, what happens is people don't realize a lot of times when that snow starts to melt, then it creates mudslides, and underneath it, the debris sometimes actually can help spread the fire as it goes down if it's not completely out. We had a fire here in Evergreen like that a couple of summers ago, and then we had another one in the winter. And I never thought about it. I've never been that close to home because we have a lake right around the corner, and they actually come in, gather the water and then fly it right over to the mountain and to help disperse it. And you can see the flames all night long, and the smoke. We have ash over everything, all over our cars, our driveway, everything outside. And when you get to that point where there's ash everywhere, you realize, you could be in imminent danger. It's, sometimes it's scary and challenging, and then you start debating what's valuable in your life. And I tell people, this flag right here that was flown over the Capitol is one of my prized possessions. I honor that. I was given that when I was medically discharged, and so that thing has been with me for years. So that's the thing that I would hate to lose in any fire. I'd grab my dogs, put them in the car, and I'd come back in and get that thing. I'd probably take that thing with me, but everything else I can let go.
Yeah, I know the weather in Washington has been crazy too, right? I made rain here in the Seattle area. It's just a drizzle. Like the last month, it's like the actual rain, right?
Yeah.
Like we've had I-90 closed because of blizzards, flooding, like historic flooding. And there's a town called Leavenworth, Kansas, like a tourist town, like 2 hours from Seattle. They got like 4 feet of snow in like a one day, right? They were like shut in. Yeah, it's been crazy up here.
Yeah, I think Tahoe got how many 90 inches or something, 60 inches or something in a day.
It's been craziness.
Yeah.
So next, talk about one of your nonprofits, Warrior Ascent.
Okay, so I have to kind of join that in together. So
okay,
I'm just a provider at Warriors Ascent. I have my own nonprofit, MyKC, but Warriors Ascent, I've been with them for 6 years, and that is really one of the most impactful things that I've ever done. And I can tell you that I've learned so much, and I do ask for, and I tell them this. I say, hey, I want the most critical feedback you can give me. And we start this journey on Monday, and then it's over on Friday. But Thursday evening, we either sit, depends on where we're at. Sometimes we sit next to a fire, or we'll sit in the yoga room. And I ask them, and I take notes, and I say, what can I do to improve or change? Give me the most critical feedback. And, I realize some of it, isn't applicable, but a lot of it is. And I get to learn what I'm doing well and what I need to work on. And so it's veterans, Department of Corrections, personnel, and essential personnel. We really focus on people that have had that kind of trauma, a lot of death and experienced death. And, my heart goes out to these essential personnel in Kansas City, because if you've watched any horror movie or any death or mayhem or whatever it is, I mean, that's what these people live. The stories that they tell and the things that they've seen in Kansas City of, kids being in microwaves and kids being in dryers, and just the burn and the things that they have lived, are things that we can never imagine, and how those people looked and smelt and things like that. So it's heart-wrenching that a lot of these people have gone through it. Same thing with the veterans. And so it's set up as a sequence. So, Monday we get in and we kind of talk about things. And then Tuesday is really about vulnerability, about being vulnerable and being raw, because a lot of us don't understand what that means. What does that really mean to be vulnerable? What does that mean for us? And once again, we've numbed a lot of emotions. And then Wednesday is really about transformation of no longer playing that role of the victim, but playing the role of the hero and the warrior. And how I describe that to people is that, like soldiers, most of us were in the military, we follow direction. It tells us what to do, we do it. We may question it, but we're not really going to question authority. We're going to do what we're told, but a warrior is a person that really forges their own path. They choose their own destiny. They make their own destiny. And then, so every day is kind of like a different theme. And those people's lives are truly transformed of this week. And the thing is, if anybody's listening or interested in or knows somebody that's struggling with PTSD, I can tell you that every single time I do this, somebody comes up and says that, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, or this program has saved their life. 100%. We've had people that were going to leave on Tuesday and go commit suicide, and they stayed till Wednesday. And then Thursday, they're just completely just excited again about life. They've got hope again. I want to make sure that I always provide a space of unconditional love and acceptance. It's kind of odd for a lot of men, but I'll walk in and when I introduce myself on Monday, I say, I'm Kerry Steuart. I'm a Gulf War veteran. In this space, that you are loved and accepted for who you are unconditionally, that there's no judgment, there's no criticism, there's no social comparison of who you are or the person next to you. And that this week, we're really going to focus on transforming and thinking about no longer playing the role of the victim, but playing the role of the hero. And it's that time that men will come back to me later and say, I'm the first grown man that's ever said that I love him, because I continue to tell them that entire week that I love him and that I care for him. And it's a thing that a lot of men don't share with other men. And that allows me to be vulnerable, but it allows them a space to be vulnerable, to be raw, and to be authentic. And so I still get text messages all the time, which is great, that say, Warriors Ascent, or my yoga or mindfulness, however you want to play, part of that played a role in saving and transforming their lives. And they are just completely grateful for that week. And it's free. So all they have to do is get there and show up, and they get a week-long Academy of Healing with a bunch of different providers. But I'm primarily the one that's there. I'm there from the morning, from sunrise to sunset, and I do a variety of different talks. So we'll talk about holistic methods to healing, or self-care, or self-love, or even Ayurveda. We talk about exercise and sleep, and turning conflict into intimacy, or healthy boundaries. So we have a lot of discussions that people have never thought about. How does this work in my life? What does a healthy boundary look like? Or how can I take the conflict into my life and turn it into intimacy?
So talk about men's health. So I'm on TikTok a lot, probably too much, I admit. And there was a lady posted a question on there. Like, TikTok, you post questions, people stitch. She posted a question. She's like, I generally want to know if you're a man on this app and something's going wrong, or you're depressed, or something's not going right, who do you go to? And literally thousands of men posted, no one, I'm a man. No one cares what I think. I can't, I'm like literally, and all the females, they were like heartbroken, right? How do we, how do we fix this? Is it fixable? I mean, because.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, first of all, you have to find somebody you trust. You have to find somebody that loves you and accepts you, and that the ego isn't going to get in the way. So if I ever see posts like that, or I see anything, I always just respond and say, hey, if there's anything anybody that's reading this thread needs, or if you ever feel, suicidal or depressed or anxious, here's my phone number. You can call or text me anytime. And I think that's part of it, is knowing that there's somebody out there that they can reach to, because I get these messages all the time, or phone calls all the time. And I think that's what, and I've been talking about this a lot, and I think people get confused, but that's what we're really missing in our politics today, and our leaders, our spiritual leaders. Somebody that really knows who they are and knows their agenda. They're not going to flip flop and say, oh, this year I don't like gays, and this next year I do like gays, or I'm not for this, I'm not for that. They need to decide who they are and what they are. But I think what we need is people to know that they can reach out anytime to somebody that loves and cares for them. I think what's unfortunate is we have a whole group of society, a whole group of men that their ego has gotten in the way, and they've never told anybody they love them or really felt love from another man. And so, yeah.
Do you think people more likely to reach out to someone they don't know for these kind of things versus like a best friend or wife or someone close to them?
I think it depends. I mean, I have a friend, unfortunately, he just passed away a couple of weeks ago of COVID, but he was a very big advocate for mental health in the police department in Newton, Kansas, and Wichita area. And he would be like, somebody struggling, they knew to reach out to him. So he was kind of like the go-between guy. He was a very big advocate for Warriors Ascent. But at least once a month, I'm talking to one of his colleagues. Either it's, somebody that's driving an ambulance or a fire department or police department that is struggling. And I mean, thankfully, a few months ago, one of the guys was suicidal. And I got on the phone with him and I talked to him, and I didn't resolve the issue. I got him in touch with people that can resolve the issue. And I think that's kind of knowing, once again, the healthy boundaries of, hey, my gifts and talents, this is not my realm, but I'm going to get you to where we can get you help. And thankfully, the guy's still with us today, you know. But I think that's part of it, is where's our spiritual leaders? I'm not talking about a religious affiliate. I'm not talking about, you know, part of being a religion. I'm talking about somebody that has enlightenment, somebody that really truly cares about our community and will do whatever they can, you know. And I think it's possible. I just think we need a revolution. We need people that are finally sick of it, and it's like, this is my belief system, this is what I believe in, this is what I understand, this is what I get, and I'm gonna stand up for that.
So, Kerry, what's your thoughts on this, or opinions, or maybe you know the answer, right? So, suicide's a big thing, is a bad thing. Hopefully, I asked this question correctly. But like, suppose you ask someone, "Hey, are you doing okay? Are you all right?" And if they say, "Well, I'm actually thinking about committing suicide," and you help them out, but do most people actually commit suicide? Do they even admit to it? Like, you ask them, like, somebody might be planning to kill themselves. You say, "Are you okay? Can I help you?" And they say, "No, I'm fine." And next they commit suicide. Do the stats show that most people actually commit it, reach out to help or anything like that, or just go do it?
Well, I don't know the stats statistically, United States or even globally, but I can say that anybody that's ever reached out to me, we've always been able to help and find somebody to help and provide them help, even, you know, even with a friend. So the thing is, I think it's how you kind of lead by example, and you give people hope. That's what we're really lacking, right? Is hope for all mankind. So how do you address that situation? I think a lot of times my story, my path, my journey of where I was is an inspiration to other people, because I could have committed suicide multiple times, right? And I could have ended my life, but I don't know my future connections. And if I would have done that, I wouldn't have been able to make the impact that I have on other people's lives, you know? So I think personally, from my experience, everybody that's reached out, you know, I have not had anybody personally commit suicide after they've reached out to me.
That's great.
I mean, even going, and it's challenging me to say this, because I know this could change, but statistically, you know, before Warriors Ascent, there was one person that committed suicide before I joined the organization. So in the last 6 years, every single person that has gone through, not one person has committed suicide. And that may change, but it's a great statistic that, you know, I can say that I've had a positive impact on a lot of people's lives. Thousands,
great news.
Thousands of people, yeah.
So, Kerry, next talk some more about MYKC, and especially when you talk about your core values and the process that you went through to come up with the core values for MYKC.
Yeah, so basically, to me, MyKC is it has dual meanings. All right, so one of them is, if it's my Krishna conscience, is what, you know, my people from India told me, but I didn't realize that at the other time. But it was just kind of like, you know, my opportunity to really connect. And I've kind of redone the I would say rebranded, you know, over the last year with mindfulness, knowledge, yoga, and community. And so what we want to do is really have an opportunity just to connect with anybody we can in the community on different levels. So what I do is I provide yoga, mindfulness, meditation, and I do these talks. So the same thing that I do for Warriors Ascent, if you wanted me to come out to Seattle, I would do the same thing. And it really depends. Sometimes it is a week-long retreat. Sometimes it's condensed down into a couple of days or things like that. But giving people the opportunity really just to find acceptance, find love, find the things that they're wanting, you know? And so I think it's just doing that. So to me, it's about social enrichment. How can I ask myself this each and every morning, how can I enrich my life? How can I focus on myself, self-care, reset, find healing energy, find forgiveness, get rid of the guilt, the shame, the grief? How can I find all those things in order to give those to other people, right? And then once I can do that for myself, then I can really focus on the community. But I think that's where a lot of people get lost in their journey and their path, is that they want to give and give and give and focus on everybody else, but they don't want to be alone with themselves. And then once we're alone with ourselves, then we can actually focus on healing and caring and loving and knowing what's really important and what our true values are. So with a nonprofit, what I'm able to do is provide yoga mats. So I do Manduka. I believe in quality. I really want to provide you a great foundation. So it's a yoga mat. It's 2 blocks. It's a journal that I've published, and a yoga strap and a blanket, because I want your foundation in mindfulness and meditation to be solid. And our primary focus the first entire day is all about breath, because that's what I learned through my journey in my past. So basically, I'm giving people the modalities and the things that have worked for me, and I'm giving that to the community. And I know it's a proven record because I've been doing it now for 7 years, but I've been working with Warriors Ascent for 6 years, and I know this method works. It worked for me, and it's worked for thousands of other people. And it's really a foundation starting with your breath.
Can you talk some about your, let's talk about your actual yoga journey? Like, how did you find yoga? Like, why you got so involved with it? Talk about your journey some in yoga.
Yeah, that's exciting. So go back to when I retired, and physically, I was just physically, mentally, spiritually, I was in a very dark place. I was very suicidal. I was very anxious. I had a lot of guilt and shame from the military that I couldn't overcome. And it's still a challenge today, right? When you take a lot of innocent lives during war, it's hard to find forgiveness. And then you want to blame, other people for that. And then you start thinking about your own family. So I know that played a lot of role in it. A lot of it was just my overall environment. So what I did was I retired, and then I went out to New Jersey for that Gulf War testing. And that's when they told me my situation is immunizations and exposure, right? And so they didn't tell me at the time, but now I've done the research. And so they're pretty much guessing, and it was the anthrax. So that you give you the anthrax, and then you're around this very unhealthy, very toxic environment on all levels. And so they suggested 3 things. They suggested biofeedback. And at that point, I had no idea what that was. I'm like, I don't know what biofeedback is, but okay. Tai Chi, which I knew what Tai Chi was. It's cool, fluids, and then yoga. And then I'm like, man, there's so much different types of yoga. So I was ironic because as soon as I got back, I already had an appointment with a provider, Dr. Black. I'll never forget this guy. He had kind of long hair like us, gray hair, and I go into the doctor there at Leavenworth, and he's kind of talking to me about like mushrooms and transcendence and like getting high. And I'm like, is this guy testing me? Like, is he asking me questions to see if I'll fall for this? Like, I couldn't get out. And I say they put you in a big comfy chair, and they check your oxygen, they check your pulse, your breath, they're checking everything before and after the session. It's a 20-minute session. You sit in a big comfy chair, and he's like, what kind of music you like? I'm like, I like this nature, relaxing stuff. And then he put something cool on the screen, and I just focused on my breath. And it was the first time, in over 20 years that I left the VA hospital more relaxed than I went in. Every time I go to the VA hospital, I'm stressed. I'm anxious. I'm frustrated. I walk away, and they didn't help me. They didn't do anything for me. This is the first time that I felt more calm and more relaxed. And I said, okay, I'm just going to focus on my breath, because I think it was about a 45-minute at least drive home. So the whole time I just focused on the breath. And then I got home, I'm like, this is the most relaxed I've been. I don't even remember. So I started diving into what is mindfulness, what is biofeedback. And then I started doing my own routine every morning. So I would get up. I love Lake Tahoe. So if anybody's been to Lake Tahoe, it's one of those places that to me, it's just magical. Evergreen's like a mini Tahoe. I think that's probably why I've ended up in Evergreen. And I have a photo that I've taken of a little boat there, and then the water's just crystal clear, and it's magical. You can see the rock formation. And I'd sit there, and I'd get on my couch, and where the arm of the couch is, I would put my legs over that, and I have a bunch of pillows and blankets behind me. I'd light some incense, light a diffuser. I like it warm, had it warm. And then I just turned up music kind of loud that was calming and relaxing. And I'd sit there and look at Lake Tahoe, and I'd set my intention for forgiveness. And I would be like, how can I forgive myself? How can I forgive myself for everything that I've done, right? How can I release this guilt and this shame? And then I would be like, okay, I need some healing energy. I would start to observe what's going on in my body. Is my back sore, leg sore? Just a general observation of what's going on with me, just really physically, and then dive into mentally and spiritually. And from that observation is when I would say, okay, this needs to be my intention today, because, I'm feeling a little heartbroken, or I'm feeling a little sad, because at those times I'm very depressed, I'm very anxious. And I would start off every morning doing that for about 30 to 45 minutes. Then I would do it again at lunch, and then I would do it in the evening. And I started feeling a lot better. And then when I had like a trigger, something happened in my life, any kind of drama or something, I'd step away from that and I would go be mindful and meditate. And then I started actually walking to city parks in Kansas City, and I would just take a blanket or whatever, find a spot, and I would just sit there and look at the trees or the clouds or whatever it is, and sit there and meditate for 30 to 45 minutes. And I did this every day. And I realized a whole complete change and transformation. So about 6 months after that is when the first time I stepped into a yoga studio. Because I talked to my daughter also, and she was in California. She's like, I think yoga would be beneficial for you. I'd listened to her more than I'd listened to the VA. So I'm like, well, the VA suggested it, but I want your advice because she'd been doing yoga. So there was actually a yoga studio on the same street. So I just walk up to the yoga studio, went in, and I thought that you're supposed to be mindful and be present and focus on these slow, deep, oceanic breaths. And I thought that this was the whole process. I thought everybody did that. So I just sat down and I'm like, okay, my intention today is just going to be patience. I'm just going to be patient in acceptance of where I'm at in this yoga class. And I'll never forget, because if you've ever go to a yoga class the first time, you always sit way in the back, right? You're like, oh, I want to see what everybody else is doing. I don't know anything about all these crazy poses and stuff. I'm going to be back and observe. I couldn't do a damn pose, brother. I couldn't do one. I felt like it was a one-on-one. I felt bad for that instructor because she had to keep coming all the way from the front, all the way to the back and helping me get into these poses and do these things. But I tell you, when I left, I was so calm and so relaxed. And I was like, wow, this is really transformative. So I went back a couple more times, and it was around the winter. And I met this young girl, and she's like, I took off 2 weeks from work, and I'm doing 2 yoga sessions every day. So I'm doing yoga for 14 days straight. It's like, well, shit, I can do yoga for 30 days straight. I'm retired. So I dove in and I did it. I almost did every single one at that studio, but we had some snow and ice storms in Kansas City, and they closed down the studio. So I just did it at home. And I'm like, this is very transformative. When you're that calm, that relaxed, you're focusing on your intention, you're doing these slow, deep box breathing, like you feel great, you feel calm. I said, this is very life-changing. So I dove into yoga teacher training. I started volunteering at a bunch of studios in Kansas City. And then I opened up my own studio as my own nonprofit. And it went really, really well. It was an amazing adventure and journey. And it's an opportunity for me to connect and give back. So the studio is no longer a physical studio. I do a lot of things like this. I meet with a lot of clients on mindfulness, meditation, breath work, or I even talk about healthy boundaries, so turning conflict into intimacy. So due to COVID, it's kind of helped expand, because now this is normal for us to be able to connect. Instead of me sitting down at your front table, your table in your dining room, or wherever it is, your office, we can connect virtually. I still prefer the opportunity to connect in person and do that. So that's basically that nonprofit and my journey and path with yoga. So I did teacher training in Kansas City, then I went to India, and that's when I learned a whole different level, because it's kind of the bhakti, like the universal love, out in a place called Echo Village outside of India, outside of Mumbai. Oh man, I want to say an hour and a half or 2 hours, but it's all village that they've created that's natural. I mean, they take raw sewage and they filter it, and they have a display. So you sit here next to this raw sewage, they pump it up into this big vat, and then they have big rocks, small rocks, sand, and then they have this plexiglass on the side so you can see the filtration. And then you can see all these plants. They have certain plants that help absorb all the waste. And then they pump it over to this other vat, and you can see the water's completely clear and there's no odor to it. And then they pump it out and they use it for all the vegetation. So like you could walk out your villa there and there could be like mango and banana, and it's amazing. So they pump in, or they bring in rice, and then they bring in filtered water for the tourists. But basically everything you need is right there on this village. They've made their own bricks. They've made everything out of the land right there. It's just, it was very nice going to a place where you feel truly unconditional love and acceptance for an entire month. And then I came back and just dove deeper into all those concepts. And from the feedback from Warriors of Sin and from other things is where I've kind of derived these other topics, because we have a lot of internal conflict. How can we create that to intimacy? We don't have healthy boundaries. Most of us with PTS have allowed other people to take advantage of us, and we get to the point where, we're a trigger. We don't know if it's a bomb or a bear. Somebody's pulled out in front of me. I'm just going to explode, right? So how can we have healthy boundaries? How can we set in a life of self-care? How can we devote more time to ourselves each and every day? And that's how that whole journey and the whole path is. So I want to be able to connect to people on a different level. I want to enrich the lives of our community. And I want our community to go back to loving and accepting each other for who they are.
So two random observations. So you're the third guest, the last five, who's brought up like psychedelics, mushrooms, marijuana. So I think that's kind of interesting. And then talking about mushrooms, hopefully it's still open. I was stationed in Fort Leavenworth for a year with my family. And I think it's called Zona Rosa in Kansas City.
Yeah.
So there's a place there called, I think it's called Hereford House.
Yes.
I mean, I just remember they had the best stuffed mushrooms we've ever had, right? And we always joke around, like, let's fly back to Kansas City, go get some stuffed mushrooms, right? So that came up in my mind, yeah.
Well, if you ever come back when I'm leading a retreat at Warriors of Sin, you can come check it out. I think it would be a great connection, great opportunity. I only get advice. I know with marijuana, everything in moderation, right? And so from the studies and statistics, with moderation, what happens is people dive into it too much. So instead of just taking one or two hits, a day, they're smoking all this. And then what happens is it actually increases their PTSD, it increases their depression, increases their anxiety. They become more lethargic, lazy. They don't want to exercise. It messes up their sleep routine. Everything in moderation. The people that I've known that have done the mushrooms, even though it's not legal in America, right? They've done them, and there's a place in Costa Rica. Actually, there's a veteran from Kansas City that has a place down in Costa Rica. It's all monitored. They want to make sure you're in a safe space. So you start off little micro dosing, checking in, and then you have like a buddy system, and they have a whole methodology that they use that works. And what they've all said was that, like, it's taken them to the next level. Like Warriors of Sin, the mindfulness yoga, all those things are really great concepts. They're very, very useful, but there's still something they feel like a lot of them are missing. And once they go through and do, the mushroom aspect of it, it's really cleared and cleansed and got everything out, right? So maybe for me, doing the mindfulness and meditation, I have more time to devote to it, but sometimes we need a little enhancement. We need a little amplifier to help us, get our life back to where it was. And I think those can be tools as long as everything in moderation.
So Kerry, how does one become a yoga instructor? It's like, you got to take a certain class, certain course. You have to travel to India. Just say you're a yoga instructor. I mean, I'm sure anyone can say, I'm Jason Cavins, I'm going to do yoga now, right?
Right. I mean, there's a lot of corporate places in America, and I suggest people, if you're going to go to a place, like Core Power, they have the best extensive training manual out there. But once again, there's no spiritual aspect to it. You're not going to dive into the spiritual unless you're already a spiritual person. They're not going to provide that path. They're going to provide a path of, I would say, least resistance. It's going to be short, concise, precise. You're going to get a lot of the core values. And if it really resonates with you, go someplace like India and spend a month with people like in the Bhakti that really provide a path of unconditional love and acceptance. So basically, anybody that applies is going to get accepted. You're just going to pay. It's kind of like college. I mean, there's a requirement, but as long as you can make it through and pay, and pass the grades, you're going to have a college degree. It's what you do with it afterwards, right? How do you expand on that understanding, that mindfulness? Because it's only 200 hours. I mean, there's hardly anything going on in 200 hours, And so the thing, I may have dogs barking soon. Hang on one second. I got to shut my door.
All right.
We live out here in rural Colorado, so we have septic and propane and all of that, and we have a shared driveway. And so propane tanks right in front of my house, and my dogs they'll bark at anything. I don't even hear anything, but they're out there barking, and I'm like, what's going on? So basically anybody could do that. I don't know anybody that didn't go through a teacher training that didn't get approved to be an instructor, but there's a lot of pressure, right? Because you have a lot of celebrity yogis, and then usually the people that are instructing are very, very good. So a lot of times we feel like we have to emulate that person or be as good as that person to teach, and that's just not always the case.
Is it Sedona, Arizona, like a known like yogi place too?
Yeah, there's supposedly like a vortex of energy in Sedona. When I went there, I really didn't feel it. I feel it more in Tahoe and Evergreen than I feel there. I feel more connected to myself and spirituality in the mountains than I do in the desert. To me, it's just being around all the trees and all the nature. And I love Evergreen because of all the wildlife. We have so much amazing wildlife, deer and elk and coyote and fox, and we have a creek right in front of our house. So like the neighbors, they had a little otter, and then the other lady had a turtle. And so I've seen osprey and herring and eagles. So to me, that's more of a spiritual connection. And I think that's part of it. I think part of the problem that we have in America is that we're in these toxic environments, mentally, physically, spiritually. So physically, a lot of us live in a city that's very toxic. We're not connected to a lot of the people in the city. There's a lot of stress, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of pollution. And so what happens is you're around all this energy all the time, and you don't really get the opportunity to release. And so when people get out into nature, they start to feel this connection. And I think that's been one of the biggest problems for a lot of people, is understanding their wants and their needs. When I lived in Kansas City, I was in the plaza, and it offered everything that I ever wanted. I could hop on the bus right by the street. The bus would take me to the VA hospital. I could walk to restaurants. I could walk to grocery stores. I could walk to the gym. I could walk anywhere. I did not have to drive. But the environment was just very, very toxic. So for me, being more rural, being out in nature is everything I need to heal, to reset, to recover and repair. So I think that's part of it is, finding that balance of what is it you really, really need? What is it you want? And how can you start to heal and recover?
Is there some type of like annual yoga instructor conference that y'all go to compare notes and compare different things?
That would be a great idea, but no, there's nothing. There are a lot of trainings you have to do. I think it's 30 hours, like every 3 years of additional training, and that can be a variety of different things. But there's not like a conference like that. There's a national, I would say, Kids Yoga Alliance conference that's kind of like that. And that's in DC. And it's at Washington University there. And it's really awesome. It's a really awesome experience. But a lot of times, people don't share, or people a lot of times in the yoga community, you got to think is like people like me. I went through it because of trauma experiences. I went through it because I was struggling. And so there's a lot of us out there that go through yoga, but even they think that yoga is going to solve all their problems, this yoga training, and it doesn't. You still got to do all the work. It's not that magic pill, that magic button. So I think a lot of times these people, they go through it thinking that all these problems are going to be resolved, and it's not. It's like, oh, now I'm aware that I'm the problem. I got to focus on myself. How can I heal myself, right? So a lot of people go through the training and then they never end up being a yoga instructor. I have a ton of them. But what I talk about through training is it's more like life coaching. I talk about using your gifts and talents. Like I've had one that's become a very, very successful realtor, right? She's mindful. She uses all those same techniques of being mindful, of being present, of everything she can. As if you were to come into her yoga class, that's how she treats you as a customer, as a guest. So, going through training, I would say just like the college, if you can go through one that's very spiritual and offers us, an opportunity for transformation, it's going to help you in your everyday life. It's going to help you with your communication with anybody in your life.
And there's actually like many types of yoga, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
and
how did you pick the one yoga that you use? What brought you to that one?
So I talk about doshas. I do a talk when I do Warriors of Sin or any of those retreats, I just do a real short thing over dosha. So it's kind of like you're predisposed to have certain elements. And depending on your dosha, there's certain types of yoga that you would enjoy. And it's funny because I go back, and before I knew or understood Ayurveda or doshas, there were certain yogas that resonated with me. One of them is yin, which is like a deep stretch, and I turn that into a guided meditation. So you're supine, you're on your back or sides or whatever, you're not standing, but you'll hold postures, like a leg stretch, arm stretch, shoulder stretch for like 3 to 5 minutes, and I'm meditating and talking you through that. So that really resonates with me. And then the second one is like a Vinyasa Flow, where you're doing breath to movement. So you would inhale to warrior one, and then you would exhale into like a revolved side angle, inhale to like a high lunge, exhale, extended side angle, things like that. So every inhale, you're doing one breath, every exhale or a movement, and then every exhale, you're doing another one. The one that I don't like is like a hatha. A hatha is where like you'd get into a warrior one, hold it for 60 seconds, warrior two, 60 seconds. And I mean, with my medical conditions, I can't even focus standing and holding those postures. So there's those types. There's Kundalini, where it's a breath, it's really intense. Aerial is another one where like you're in an aerial hammock. Those are great for anybody and everybody. I always suggest aerial classes. And then you have like a power heated vinyasa. And then you have the hybrid, where some of them may be like a hatha and a yin mixed together. So you have all these different types of methods. So what I do in my yoga teacher training is I every weekend or every time we have a session is I introduce you to one of those. So we start off with yin, because yin's the one that's on the ground, and then hatha, you can incorporate that, and then we go into a vinyasa, power vinyasa, and then we do aerial. And so I let you know like all the different types of yoga in my teacher training, so you're aware of all of them. And then I actually insist that part of the prerequisite is that you go to at least 5 other yoga studios and do 5 different types of classes at those studios. And you do feedback and do an observation, and I give them like the form and everything to do, because it's important for them to have that diversity and understand it. So, I always say, with exposure, you're granted understanding. With that understanding, you're granted enlightenment. And that's how it was in the military or anything you do. CC's Pizza, relationships. And so you have to expose yourself to those other types of yoga to understand whether or not they serve you or not. Those other types of relationships. We've all been in toxic relationships, right? We didn't know they were toxic until we get out of it. I talk about in one of my talks, when I talk about holistic methods to healing and gut and what, the journey of your food, for years, I always had stomach aches. And then I started going gluten-free and organic, and I didn't have stomach aches all the time. But tradition is, winter comes around, I get a hot chocolate. And I went into a QT there in Kansas City, got my hot chocolate, and then my stomach started hurting. It's like, oh, I was like, man, my stomach used to hurt all the time. This was normal for me. But once you take all that negative toxic energy out, and whether that may be for the city for you, or some people, maybe it's the country, wherever it is. But once you take that out and you feel relaxed and calm, and then you put it back in, that's not normal. You don't have to have a toxic life. You can have a healthy, holistic life. And so that's the same thing with your yoga. Find what really serves you, and don't feel like you have to do the other things. Yoga truly is a way of life. It really is. It's this conversation. It's how we approach the people in our life. It's how we think about the journey of our food. It's how we think of nature. It's being mindful. It's being present. It's being in the moment. It's finding gratitude, acceptance, love, and it's being okay with positive and negative emotions. When the fear and the anxiety comes up, why do I have those emotions? So it's not just the thing you see on the mat. Yoga truly is a way of life. And it's understanding what really serves you and using your gifts and talents for our community. Just like you say you're not creative, but this podcast is probably a gift and talent that a lot of people don't feel like they're capable of doing.
Yeah,
and they're not.
True.
Right?
Because I know you talk a lot about the 1 hour on the mat, but then the 23 hours living your yoga life, right?
Yeah. And that could be anything. I mean, when you sit down to eat, think about the journey of your food. Are you mindful and present when you're eating your food? When you're driving the car and you're going to work and it's a 20-minute commute, are you okay being in the moment, right? And being okay, your morning routine, all of that stuff can add up to an hour. I say if all you have is 8 to 10 minutes in the morning to focus on mindfulness and your breath, dedicate that 8 to 10 minutes. But then on your way to work, do the same thing. And when you're at work, do the same thing, because the way home, And then in the evening, make sure that you go out and spend some time in nature. We go out every single day unless I'm in way too much pain. Otherwise, in the summer and the other months, I'm out 3 times a day. They're not long, always hikes. Sometimes they're 15, 20 minutes, but if I'm feeling really good, it could be 45 minutes or an hour. Last year, I would say I finally made it to the top of Mount Evergreen. I think that was an hour, maybe an hour and a half up, and then like 45 minutes. And that was the first time that I've ever done that in the 3 years we've lived here. So it doesn't have to be like, hey, understand your physical limitations. Understand that I'm not going to overextend myself today, and then I'm not going to be able to move for the next day. Just be mindful, be present. And that's really the yoga way of life, man. And also goes to emotional intelligence. How do you make other people feel? And what do you think about? And lose that entitlement and lose that ego and be humble and love and accept yourself. Because if I don't love and accept myself, I can't love and accept others. It's impossible for me to give something I don't possess. And I think a lot of times we act like it and we try to be that, but we realize, hey, there's something missing in our lives. And a lot of times it's just love and respect for ourselves and hope.
So, Kerry, you talked about the positive about yoga, the pros of it. Are there any cons of yoga? Anything difficult about it? And is there any situation where you tell someone yoga is not for you?
No, there's always some kind of yoga for everybody, right? So, there may be the high intensity physical power vinyasa that's not, for somebody that has, type of ailments, bursitis, or, things like that. But anybody can be alone and be with themselves. So, journaling can be a form of yoga. Going for a hike, a walk. What people realize, like when they go through Warriors Ascent, is because I'll always ask them on Thursday, and everybody's perception is different, right? One of the ladies absolutely loved and adored her through her journey and her path and everything. And she was just so excited to finally be in this space, because it's a whole week to spend with yourself. It's a whole week to just focus on yourself and love and accept for you who you are. So Thursday, she's like, and she always had this little poppy thing, and she's talking, and she's like, Kerry, I found out what my yoga is. I finally figured it out. I was like, well, it's only been 4 days, but I'm happy for you. Sometimes it takes people 4 years. She's like, deer hunting. And all the other ladies are shocked. They're like, what? She goes, I know for some of you, maybe, but she goes, I'm alone. I'm in nature. And it's not about whether or not I get a deer. It's about being connected. And she goes, that's the time that I'm in prayer. That's the time that I feel empowered. That's the time that I feel excited about life. And she goes, and I don't have to be with anybody. And she goes, I'm not. When I go deer hunting, I'm all by myself. I don't hunt with anybody else. And she goes, that's my form of yoga. And that's what it is, brother. Really, your journey, your path. Where is it that you can be mindful and be present? Where is it that you don't have to focus on the future or the past? You can just be right here, And that's a great example. A lot of people, it's running or jogging or hiking or fishing, right? Those are all forms of yoga. They may not serve you, but they serve a lot of people. So there's always some kind of form of yoga. So it doesn't have to be that physical aspect of being on the mat, but what is it you're doing for that hour of self-care? And if it's fishing that's going to allow you to reset and heal and connect on a completely different level, then it's go fishing, man. Go fishing every day you can,
Kerry, what does it mean? What's your definition of being authentic?
Oh, that's a good one. I would say, to me, it's being completely vulnerable, that I'm not hiding anything, right? So once again, doesn't mean that you don't have healthy boundaries, because you could ask me a question that I'm not prepared to answer. I'm not prepared to discuss. But it's really allowing yourself to be so raw, so authentic, and so genuine that you're completely open up and you're not hiding, right? A lot of times we have this physical mask, and a lot of times we have other masks that we're wearing in our life. It's removing that mask. It's kind of like this, Can you hear my dogs?
Yeah, that's fine.
So it's kind of like this. That's why, and I talk about this week with warriors, right? So if we're all warriors, we feel safe with being around other warriors. If I know you're going to protect me, I know you're going to take care of me, then I can let down my guard at certain times, right? When I go out and I have to protect my community, I have to serve my community, then I need to put on this guard and I need to make sure that I have even more stringent, healthy boundaries. But if I'm in a room with just warriors, I can be completely, totally authentic with you guys because I know you're going to love, you're going to accept, and you're going to respect me. You're going to give me the proper feedback. It's not going to be biased. It's not going to be, to the point where it's a cancel culture where you're no longer invited. It's like, how can we work together as a community through this?
So next, I remember hearing this story somewhere. I can't remember where, but basically the person said, like suppose you have like past trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like somebody did something bad to you, they ask for forgiveness, you forgive them. And so like you give them the forgiveness, like taking the nail out of the fence. But even though you can forgive someone, that hole is still there. And people have problem dealing with the hole that's still left behind. Can you talk about that? What's your advice on that?
Yeah. So basically, there's a couple of things you won't forget, right? So like, we're in a society a lot of times where we want to judge and condemn people because they don't look or behave the way we do. So say, for example, there's a mask mandate, right? And you have to wear a mask. Well, there's a lot of women that I've talked to over the last 2 years, over the last 6 years, that have been raped. A lot of them have been raped while they're in the military, serving our country, right? Normally what happens is somebody puts their hand over their face. Putting that mask on their face reminds them of that journey and that path. Right. So we need to make sure that we understand and give people acceptance and forgiveness of where they're at. I think it's to the point where what we need to do is we need to offer a whole entire level of acceptance and love and forgiveness, but we need to meet people where they're at. Tell me the question one more time because my mind just went blank.
Yeah, no worries. So so someone does something
the
bad.
Trauma.
The hole in the fence.
Yeah, with the guy doing the propane out here and the dogs barking, I got distracted. So basically, my theory and my path that's helped me the most with that is not forgetting, but forgiving. So once again, it's healthy boundaries. So if you come up to me and you're mad and you're angry and you punch me in the face and you're like, "Oh man, I'm sorry," and I said, "What does sorry mean? What does sorry mean to you? Does that mean you're never going to do it again? Because that's what it means to me." Right? So once again, when we establish the healthy boundaries and we're communicating effectively what I expect out of the person that has created that trauma and that trigger, then we can kind of move forward. So I'll tell you one thing that's been extremely helpful for me is a letter of intention. So I write letters of intentions to people I've hurt, people that have hurt me, people I've loved, and people that love me. And it's always in a positive regard of where we're at today. But that's helped me release a lot of that pain, that anguish. In Kansas City, there was a lady that had been raped multiple times by this guy. And she ended up actually forgiving the guy. And then they did a series of talks in person. And she goes, "I understand the situation he is at, and I've been able to forgive him. Will I ever forget? No." And so he explains his story, why he took advantage of the woman that he did. She tells her story of how she's been able to forgive him. And it lets me know that even like that has got to be one of the most triggering, toxic times in our life of a woman being raped, right? But she's able to forgive this guy. So it's really a lot of times of motivation of what does that really mean? Because is it a projection or a reflection of ourselves? And what's stopping us for forgiving him? Because when you can't forgive somebody, they have control over you. You're allowing that person to control you. And so you gotta let that go and no longer allow that person to control you, to find love, to find forgiveness, to find peace. Now, I'm not going to say that it's taking the nail out, but what I'm saying is, maybe it's the opportunity that you're really being free, because I don't want anybody to control me. I don't want to feel like I'm obsessed and this person's occupying too much of my time, energy, and effort. Now, me writing that letter of intention, and now I never write these letters. I have them all on a Google Drive. I never have the intention of sending that letter to anybody, but I've written it. And then as another trigger or a memory or something pops up, then I can type it and rewrite and edit it and go through that. But it's always in a positive content. It's always the lessons that I've learned through that experience.
Kerry, from your point of view, do we have a mental health crisis in the United States?
Yes, 100%. And it's getting worse. And once again, that goes back to the lack of spiritual leaders that we have on all levels, not only politically, but in a lot of businesses. We don't have a lot of emotional intelligence. We don't have a lot of empathy. We don't have a lot of knowledge and understanding. We're very siloed and selective, and it's my agenda only, without your perception. And we're going to have a higher suicide rate over this next year. We have more stress than ever. Our political leaders have taken so much away from us instead of empowering us. We need to feel empowered, right? We being the victim, right, is enabling him. If your daughter's an alcoholic and you keep giving her money to go buy alcohol, you're enabling her. But if you empower her to get sober and empower her to live a life of sobriety, of fulfillment, that's what we need as a whole entire society. We need people that will empower one another, not enable one another. We need a whole society that is going to give us the opportunity to really live life in abundance and not feel so restricted. And we're, I say it's good and bad. We've had a higher attendance already right now for Warriors Ascent this year than we've had forever. And it's because so many people are struggling. So I'm happy for that. But in the downturn, I realize there's so many people out there that aren't going to make it this year, that are going to commit suicide. They're going to, commit violent crimes and commit things that shouldn't be. We should be a society that loves and cares for one another. And we're just not to that point. We're not accepting one another. And so a lot of people get confused when I talk about the spiritual aspect of it, because what we need is really truly spiritual leaders. We don't need these people that are wishy-washy. We need people to stand up for values and ethics.
I know one thing, like talking about solace, one thing that drives me crazy. There's so many people who like live in bubbles and they think the world evolves around only them, right? They have no consideration for anyone else. It's them, and they have no idea how what they do or don't do impacts others. That's one of my biggest pet peeves.
Yeah, we need to love and accept ourselves so we can stop hurting each other. Because a lot of times that's just a projection or a self-reflection of ourselves. We don't love ourselves. We're upset with ourselves, and we take it out on our community. The way we drive, the way we act, the way we behave. And I'm not talking about, healthy boundaries. I'm just talking about generally, like the way people drive or the way people are being treated, right? We've lost respect for ourselves and for others. And we have a whole realm of self-entitlement, and part of that is, we need term limits on our politicians. We need to get rid of lobbyists. I will go back and say that's probably the biggest fan I was of Trump, was that he didn't have a bunch of lobbyists in his pocket, like Elon Musk with Tesla. He doesn't have a bunch of lobbyists for him. He's just like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make it happen, right? Elon Musk has been very successful without all the lobbyists. So, I think without me having a hidden agenda. So if you want to go back to being authentic, that's another thing, is do I have a hidden agenda, or I'm exactly telling you straight up how it is? And I feel like that's where we're at with a lot of these politicians. There's a hidden agenda that we don't even realize that they haven't revealed to us, and they're not being authentic, real, and genuine. Prime example, say the mayor of Kansas City. If you ever provide any type of feedback on his social media post, they remove it. They only allow positive responses. Well, that's not being genuine. That's not being raw. That's not being authentic. I'm not seeing a real glimpse of the people's perception with you. If you go onto Twitter, he can't remove all those posts. So whatever, that's why he doesn't post as much on Twitter, is because, he gets all this feedback. But if you look at a post right after he posted, there's more negative than there is positive. And then a few hours later, all the negative is removed.
Yeah,
so
that's not being authentic or anything. And
no, you're getting a one-sided perception. So those are the things right there that why we're headed for a mental health crisis, because you can't put this on the back burner. This really needs it, and it actually infuriates me when politicians say that they're going to do this, and this, and all these things, when they really know they're not capable of accomplishing any of it.
Yeah.
Don't give me broken promises, because then I'm going to lose respect for you.
Exactly. Like I should be against term limits. I'm kind of moving the other way, because like, I should type, there's always term limits, take a vote them out, but no one's voting anyone out, because they take it on people. And I think another channel should like pose those term limits, right? And you're going to be accountable for 8 years. I think that's going to give the lobbyists and bureaucrats even more power, right?
because we have people coming every 8 years or every how many years it is.
4. Yeah.
Oh, trust me, I've been here for 30 years. Well, exactly. I don't trust you. You've been here for 30 years, right?
All right. Well, it's your track record. This is what I ask. How have you enriched the lives of our community as a politician? That's it. That's if you're not enriching my life and the lives of those people around me, then you're not doing your job.
Yeah, I remember I had a guest on about a month ago, Joseph Todd. He ran for a city council, local town. He sent me a story about a guy in the local community. He ran for mayor. And so he's been the mayor, either mayor or councilman that's said like maybe 20, 30 years, right? Always get reelected. And so he went to the Seattle Times to get like an endorsement. And the Seattle Times asked you, what have you done in your time in office? And he can say he had nothing, he had nothing he could say, right? That he made no impact, made nothing better. But he kept on getting reelected, right?
Right. I love it. It's so funny. Yeah, that's just how it is. I mean, if I look back of what it is that I've done, I know that I would say the major impact or enrichment is I've saved lives. I've given people hope, acceptance, and forgiveness. And that's really the last 7 years more than ever. I fed people. CC's, you feed a lot of people. You give them value, right? But it's kind of like, really, what is your purpose? What is it you want to accomplish? What are your dreams, your visions, or your goals? And how can you get there? And I think a lot of politicians they're living, when you talk about the bubble, think about during COVID. Any governor or any mayor is probably living in $1 million home, working from home, still receiving a paycheck. Really, the person's out here that's struggling when they close down their business and they're no longer able to work, that's making $8, $12, $14 an hour. Those are the people that are really struggling and really suffering. And here's what's going to occur now. You've lost billions of dollars in revenue over the last 2 years. How do you get that revenue back? Increase taxes. That's it. So property taxes are going to increase, gas taxes, sales tax, everything that you purchase starting this year is going to increase. So not only are you going to have huge inflation prices, your dollar is going to go a lot less, and now you're going to have more stress and more anxiety, right? Plus of wearing the mask, plus of everything else that's going on. Plus, so many people are just truly, so many people are so scared of dying of COVID. And fear and anxiety weaken your immune system. So now you have all this fear, all this anxiety. Now your immune system's weaker than it ever was before because of it. So it's this negative ripple effect that we need politicians that give us all the options, that this vaccine isn't the only remedy and the only option. Here are all the list of options for you to have a healthy, holistic lifestyle and to be independent and not be codependent. I feel that a lot of people that have become codependent on one level become codependent on other levels, mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. They find that codependency on all aspects of their lives. And we need to have a community full of warriors, a community full of heroes that are empowered, that we empower one another. And we understand.
There's a stat out there that says, since COVID started, I think 75% of white collar workers work remotely, only 15% of blue collar workers work remotely, right? So the people like white collar really kind of well off middle class jobs, software developers, accountants, HR, they're not really at risk of COVID because they can stay home and work. Like the plumbers, you can't, if you're a plumber, you can't change somebody's pipe from home, right? Plumbers, all these people, they get paid good money too, but they're at more risk of COVID. I think it puts even more stress on a specific demographic of the population.
Right. Well, 38 million people quit their jobs last year in America. 45% of America is employed. So that means 55% are unemployed or retired or living on Social Security or whatever it is. But you only have 45% of America employed right now. And then you had 38 million people that quit their jobs last year. So we're in a very, not to get too off into the realm of politics, but we're in a very unique situation right now, because you got to think of every major city, there's a Democrat run governor, and you have the highest crime, you have the highest drug use, you have the highest homeless, but you also have the highest income and the highest property values, right? So it's like, you got to have this balance of, hey, I live in the city and here's all the pros, but here's also all the cons at once. And we're in a very, very, very unique place in history right now. I believe, from my personal space, that this year you're going to see even a more influx of people relocating to areas that resonate with them more than ever. They're going to move out of the areas that no longer resonate with them, and they're going to move to areas that do, because they're not working, and they really can make that choice to move wherever they want to in the country, right? And a lot of people work from home. So I think this is going to be the year more than ever that you're going to see a whole relocation, especially before, I mean, interest rates to me are super low compared to the 80s. They're at 3.5% for homes. But I think you're going to see more of an influx of people. And to me personally, I think they're going to move to places that are like Colorado, or places maybe like Washington, or places that or even more rural. So they're going to move out of the city, like out of Denver, and move more rural, or Kansas City more rural, or Seattle. They're going to go more rural, because there's a thing that we feel when we go into nature, we feel more connected, right? We feel better about who we are, and we don't always understand why. But I think that's one of the reasons that draws people further into nature, is because even though they don't want to admit it, it's healthier for them. But that's just my theory. We'll know at the end of the year what happens, how many more people relocate. But I think this is going to be a year where a lot of things change economically. And I think they're going to move to where it serves them.
Yeah, I think Seattle is a perfect example you're talking about, right? Because Seattle puts the capital L on liberal, the capital P in progressive, right? There's a lot of like homelessness, a lot of problems. But then again, you have like Amazon, Microsoft, Boeing, Starbucks, Expedia, and like it's a vibrant startup community, a lot of venture capital money. So it's a vibrant community, right? However, come all the problems still going on, right? I think a lot of communities are going to be like that.
Yeah, so they've got to figure out what is it, because a lot of times you think it's short-lived, and a lot of times people are okay with it. The people that are really okay with it will stay there. The people that are not are going to be the ones that relocate, and maybe a lot of people that have lived downtown. I know when Denver, this whole thing with COVID started with Denver, the apartments and duplexes and everything that were downtown were empty. It was the first time ever that more people were moving out of the downtown metro area.
Yeah, Seattle was the same way. Same way last year.
Yeah, I don't know where they're at today. I haven't researched it, but that's kind of my theory, is that you're going to see the most shift that you've probably seen in a long time of people relocating this year. They're just going to be tired and fed up, or they want to be in that area,
Kerry,
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Give us your definition of community.
Oh, so community to me is family, friends, or anybody that you have a connection with. And now that doesn't have to be somebody in your neighborhood, but my community expands because of I own property in Missouri, Oklahoma, and Colorado. So directly, that is my community. My community is Warriors Ascent, our veterans, essential personnel. My community is anybody that has had depression, anxiety, PTSD, anybody that's been a drug or alcoholic, anybody that's been abused, anybody that served in the military or thought about it, or a family member. To me, that's community. That it's as broad. If I could throw my net out there, right, from Seattle out to Bainbridge Island, right, and even further, or go down to Oregon, like all over, even India. I still have friends in India and Canada. That is my community. I think a lot of people, their community is different. Now, my friends, I have a very few select friends, but that's definitely my community.
So, Kerry, do you have any friends or family members that don't get what you do? And how do you explain to them what you do?
My family definitely gets it, right? And a lot of my family is super proud of what I've done. And a lot of my friends are that way as well. I think a lot of it is like that voodoo, like they get confused, right? They just like a lot of people think
you know this New Orleans voodoo, Louisiana stuff, right?
Right. They're like, what kind of voodoo stuff's he got going on, right? Or they call it the hippy dippy, right?
Yeah, that's it too. The hippy dippy, yeah, that phrase, yeah.
They all want to know like what religion I am, and that's a topic that I don't get into a lot of times, because I don't want to steer people to a certain religion. I want to steer people to their own spirituality. So I think a lot of people are a lot of my family is more appreciative than others. I think the feedback I got last year, like, so I started doing a community text. I have a community number, and with that community number, I send out a daily sometimes inspirational, thought-provoking text message, right? And some of these guys are like, man, that's some voodoo Star Wars. I've been thinking about that question all day and I can't answer it, man. I can't even focus on work or nothing, but I need you to answer it for me. Right. But I would say overall, most of the people get it. I think some people, like I got 3 or 4, maybe 5 responses last year of people that I've known since high school or right after high school, of how much they've seen grow, change, enlightenment in me, and how they haven't changed at all since high school, how they haven't got more knowledge or a lot more knowledge to the level in the same capacity that I have had, which is really inspirational. I'm not, and I realize we all change, we all transform at different levels, but I think, that was motivating to me, and that's exciting. And so I think most people, I don't get criticism. I do at the first time in Warriors Descent. Like there was this, I'll never forget this black police officer. I mean, his arms were as big as my legs. And I come in with my long hair, my incense and everything. He's like, what's your story? And then like Wednesday, he comes up and he hugs me. He's like, dude, I love you so much. And he's like, here's my phone number. If you're ever in a situation where you need help in South Kansas City, I'm always patrolling that area. So a lot of times it's that first, once again, we're judging on the looks, the appearance of who's this hippy dippy guy with the long hair coming in barefoot, or maybe my toes are painted. Don't get it. But then after they understand and realize, hey, this guy's genuine, this story, this transformation works, I feel better about who I am, get it. So I haven't got criticism from my family or my friends. I always get acceptance, and they're always very supportive.
So Kerry, let's say someone comes to you and they're filled with hate, filled with anger, filled with depression, filled with negativity. How do you help them get to a better place? What's your process for that?
Yeah, so it's not instantaneous. The first thing is just to once again, let that person know that I love and accept them for who they are today. That there's no judgment, there's no criticism, and there's no expectations. Right? We're in a safe space. We're in a space where you can be vulnerable, raw, and authentic. With any client that comes to me, not in the Warriors Descent realm, but any client, if you came to me, the first thing we're going to focus on is your mission statement. What excites you? What gets you up in the morning? What motivates you? Because we've got to find that self-motivation, and then we've got to start working on gratitude. So then I will ask a series of questions like, what is it you're great? Where do you find gratitude? Where do you find thankfulness? Where do you disconnect? Where do you feel whole and complete? Where can you go to release? And so we start focusing on the good aspects of those things. And then I always encourage, so if you go to my training, you're going to get a journal. It's an AM and PM self-care journal. So then we start focusing on self-care, and we start focusing on hope and love and acceptance, and how we find that in your life. So it's not anything that can be done normally in 5 minutes. Sometimes it takes 5 days or 5 weeks for people to transform. I will tell you overall, statistically, after people go through Warriors Descent, the majority of the people really feel a difference in 12 to 18 months after they're practicing mindfulness and meditation and journaling each and every day. The days they don't do it and the weeks they start falling off, their stress, their anxiety, everything, depression goes up, and then they come back down. So giving people a sense of purpose, of what gives them hope, and they've got to be willingness. Not everybody wants to work with me because I will hold you accountable. I had a client recently tell me he's not an alcoholic. He just drinks every day for the fun of it. And I said, well, we talk once a week. So here's what's going to happen is I'm going to check in with you from a week from now, and that you haven't drank for the entire 7 days. So next Friday, we're going to talk, and I want to know what your experience is and how connected you feel and how much closer you feel to your kids and your wife without drinking. So I sent him a text on Friday, said, hey, I'm still in Kansas City, Warriors Descent, but we can connect in a few days. I've never heard from the guy, right? And I'm okay with that, because it's like when you're ready to really change and transform and be okay with who you are, that's it. So if somebody comes to me that's anger, that's bitter, a lot of times it's a self-reflection. A lot of times it's things that have happened in their life, or they're in a very toxic relationship with themselves, and then they turn that into others. And so that's what we start off. First thing is going to be your mission statement. What drives you? What motivates you? What excites you? What gets you up in the morning? And then where do you find the positive things in your life? Genetically, unfortunately, and fortunately from our parents, we have a 50-50 shot of where we're going to be happy or not. So if both your parents, if you look at your parents and they were both pessimistic, then you're probably pessimistic. But if both of them were optimistic, then you're going to be optimistic. And then the other 40% is things that we can change, and 10% is like life experiences. So how you begin to enjoy your life, live your life, is really an opportunity to transform your life and find joy and happiness.
Kerry, so for the people you help out and are doing this stuff for, do they have 24/7 access to you, or do you have your own boundaries set up?
Well, so here's how I explain it to them. I definitely have healthy boundaries, but I do tell them I live in the Rocky Mountains. So I don't always get cell service. If I'm at home, I'm going to get cell service. But if I'm out on a hike or I'm out somewhere, I may not get cell service. So I say, hey, if you need to get a hold of me, make sure you leave a voicemail, because I may not even get the missed call. My wife calls me, friends call me, hey, I called you. I'm like, I don't have a missed call, right? So I'm in a spot where cell service is intermittent. They definitely have access because I need to be there for those people 24/7. Now, if I feel like I need to disconnect, I will turn my phone off in the evenings. If I feel like I need to be there for people, I will leave my phone off or, leave it on. So they definitely have access to me because I want to be there. If anybody calls me like, hey, I'm suicidal or I'm depressed or I'm anxious or I need to vent, I want to be available. So the majority of the time I'm available to pick up my phone, and I'll be there for them unless I have, other clients or calls or, self-care regimen. During my self-care regimen, I turn my phone on silent. So the thing is about my phone, I have no notifications turned on except for if you call me. That's it. Now I have a separate old phone that has social media on it. So it has the TikTok and the Instagram and the Facebook, and that has no notifications. So my phone has no notifications unless you're going to call me. And I'm disconnected from technology. So if it's during my self-care time, I don't care who you are. You could be the president. I'm not going to pick up.
Nice.
That's my time.
Boundaries.
Yeah, that's my time. Yeah.
Can you tell us about your weekly unscripted, I think it's a Sunday video calls that you're doing or videos you're doing on Sundays?
Yeah, I thought about it a couple of years ago, and I just really got motivated, and I talked to my wife about it because my schedule's so crazy. And I said, when is the only time I'm available? And it's crazy because like I drive normally to Kansas City on a Sunday to do a retreat. So, I'm going to have to pick a spot that I actually have good Wi-Fi for that hour and a half, but it's an opportunity to connect with the community, and once again, it's kind of serendipitous that the people that happen to join on that week, it's not always the same people. There's a few that are the same that, are diehard, but a lot of times it's people that are struggling and going through the same thing of, either obesity or it's diet or something with a spouse or a child. But we just get on there and we just chit chat like we do now. We do a check-in with everybody, see where everybody lives, just a friendly reminder, sometimes where we met, and we just talk about the things that are going on in their life and provide a path of love and acceptance, a path that's not, I would say unscripted, but not restricted. We can talk about anything you want, and we're going to, and it's always nice because the other people on the call also provide really great sound advice to whoever's struggling. So it's open to anybody, anything you want to talk about. I think a couple of weeks ago we talked about finances, and we gave a couple of methods to budgeting and what we can do to budget. So it'll be different every week. Somebody may want to talk about sunsets or sunrises or paintings or whatever. You never know where the interests and the topics go.
Kerry, can you talk about how you're utilizing social media to expand your message, and specifically your YouTube channel?
Yeah. So to me, it's really spontaneous, and it's when I can be more authentic and real. It's not like, oh, I don't have myself put up a video every single Friday at noon or Sunday or whatever it is. It's like, this is what's really been on my heart. This is what people have been talking to me about. And when they come and talk to me, I feel like I need to share this message. A lot of times it's a question. So like, Jason, if you had a specific question and you text me like, hey, I want to know about whatever, healthy boundaries, or I want to know about yoga. Well, I can't type that out, man. There's no way. So a lot of times these short, even sometimes 1 minute, 1 to 5, 10, 15-minute videos, a lot of those are questions that people have asked me personally. And for me to answer it, it's easier for me to put it out on a YouTube video, because normally there's more than one people that have that. So from my community, a lot of those videos, the majority of them have come from that. Now, like the self-care, I did like 30 days of self-care options or 30 days of yoga. Those are things that just allow people to think about, hey, 30 days of self-care. What are 30 things I can do differently over the next day, or 30 different types of yoga. But a lot of them are just questions people have asked me, and I've just provided that path, and that's a way for me to connect with my community.
And the text is the motivational text. That's something you send out every day.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And so that's something you come up. Are those your own motivation quotes? Are you using someone else's quotes? Or is it a combination?
So a lot of it is, sometimes I get inspiration. So like, it could be from a movie. It could be from like an NPR interview. It could be from something that I read. But I usually take that and formulate it into something that resonates with me. So I'll change the verbiage, a little bit, because even though like you're telling me something, I hear it differently. So I don't have my wallet with me, but I have a wallet with a journal. So even if I'm like driving down the road or something, I'll pull over and write down my quote. So I have about 400 of them. I started this last summer, just writing down things every day. So like today's quote was, "Food is information, not calories." Now I've heard that from a lot of different people, right? A lot of people have said that. But I put in there that elevated blood sugar affects the amygdala in the hippocampus, which in turn affects learning, memory, and cognition. So that's just something that I've done out of my research. So the food that we eat, it's information, and it can also affect our cognitive ability to learn, to share, to do everything that we do. So food plays a vital role. So those messages sometimes are just thoughts that I've come up with, and sometimes they're things from other interactions. Could be anything, a movie, a song, a book, NPR, whatever it is, and it's taking part of that and placing in it to where it resonates within my life.
Kerry, is there anything else that I asked you that I didn't, or anything else you want to talk about?
I would say that, if anybody's ever struggling or anybody needs anything, feel free to call me, text me. My phone number is 816-313-2013, and that's available to you. If you know anybody that's been a veteran or wants to have a whole entire week of healing, that's a Department of Correction or essential personnel, go to Warriors Ascent. I can promise you will get something out of that program. Everybody has gotten something out of that program. So you don't have to be like in a very bad, toxic state. You can be in an okay state, or you're on your path to healing. But this will really amplify it and make it a lot better. And then if there's anything that I can do for anybody that's listening at any level, feel free to reach out to me anytime. So I want the community to know that they are loved and accepted, that they're not judged, that they're not criticized, that there doesn't have to be this social comparison that you're comparing yourself to who you were or who you might be, or the social comparison as you get on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, that you feel like your life isn't enough, because you are more than enough, and that you are truly loved and accepted, and that there's hope, that you can find hope, you can find forgiveness, you can find trust. All of that is capable. That, one of the things I talk to a lot of people is they feel like they have to be in debt the rest of their life. I'm always going to have a car payment. I'm always going to have a house payment. I'm always going to have student loans. And you don't have to have any of those. You don't have to have a conventional life to be happy. You can go, like my wife and I, live in a van for 6 months without anything, and enjoy life and live life and have that unconventional life. And just, one thing I want to encourage is people that really begin to focus on self-care, and that self-care isn't selfish, and to spend at least an hour alone with yourself, and whatever that means, each and every day. So,
Kerry, can you share your social media links so people can reach out to you?
I'm going to say the easiest thing is if you just search my name. So it's Kerry. Last name is Steuart. And if you search for Kerry Steuart, you'll find me on LinkedIn, you'll find me on Twitter, you'll find me on Instagram, you'll find me on Facebook, and you'll find me on YouTube. And so if any of those platforms resonate with you, just search Kerry Steuart, KerrySteuart.
And to our listener, we'll have his phone number and all the social media links in the show notes. You find the show notes at www.cabinetstatesblog.com. And be sure to share this episode with your friends and network, and be sure to subscribe to the Jason Cabinets Experience. Kerry, so we come to the end of a talk. You had any last minute wisdom or advice on any subject you want to talk about?
I would just say, man, once again, I love you guys. I love and accept you guys for who you are today. And I want you to begin to feel that. I want you to begin to feel excited and really think about transforming from the role of a victim. I'm talking victimhood. We've all been victims, but into that warrior where you're forging your own path, you're choosing your own destiny, and you're finding that community and that society that you really appreciate, respects, and loves you. We only have one life to live. And that this year, I really want you to find joy, peace, acceptance, unconditional love, and hope for all mankind. Jason, thank you so much for this opportunity, brother. I appreciate it.
No, thank you, Kerry. Thank you for being here, for being a guest. I really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
And to our listeners, thank you for your time as well. Remember